About 2 years ago, my boyfriend at the time and I decided to go on a hike right before the sunset, which, yeah, sounds dumb. But it's something we had done multiple times before with no issues. There was something about the eeriness of the woods at night that I liked, not so much my boyfriend though. To start our hike, we had to go through really tall plants and bushes. We were practically in the middle of nowhere. About a mile into our hike, we came across some abandoned structures and sat down to take a breather. I'm not sure exactly what my boyfriend said to make me do this, but as a joke, I whistled and said, "See, nothing whistled back. We're alone." Not even 20 seconds after saying that, we heard a whistle. It was a bit out of the way from us, but still too close for our liking. We immediately started booking it in the opposite direction of the whistle and didn't look back. After running for as long as we could, we realised that we were lost. We wandered around for about 10 minutes before we stumbled across some train tracks that led back into town about a mile or two down the way. It's important to note that these tracks had thick woods lining both sides. The right side is where we came from. We decided to walk as we had run out of energy and somewhat felt safe. We were wrong to assume that we were safe. We got to the point where we could see the lights from town, maybe a quarter to half a mile away. Down the tracks a little bit, we could very faintly see the outline of what looked to be a deer coming out of the right side of the woods. It stopped in the middle of the tracks and just stood there. I attempted to shine my flashlight. This flashlight I had was pretty dim. It was just a random one I found in the back of the junk drawer. And as soon as I lifted my light up onto it, it fled. Now I say fled because ran wouldn't be an accurate way to describe the way it moved. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like it had 4 broken legs, and its body was very low to the ground. Yet it had unbelievable speed. It almost looked like a bent and twisted monster out of a horror movie. I shined my light into the woods to the left of us, as that's where it had ran. And when I did, I saw 2 glowing eyes that looked to be at least 10 feet in the air. In a very concerned tone, my boyfriend says, "What is that?" I told him, "I don't know. Don't look at it, just run." We ran and ran until eventually we reached town and walked back home. This happened about 2 years ago, and I've tried to come up with a logical explanation of what I saw that night. And still to this day, I can never find a solid logical answer, other than that being something paranormal. I refuse to believe what I had seen for a long time, but I know what I saw. And I know I'm not crazy, as there was another person who witnessed the same thing as me. My boyfriend. He never spoke of it again, and refused to talk about it whenever I would bring it up, and never went hiking at night again after that day. I never knew what to call them until recently. The other day, I was curious to see if anyone else had experienced what I saw and felt. So, I began to research translucent beings or predator-like sightings. That's when I learned that they are called glimmer men, which eventually led me here. I had an experience with the glimmer man in the late 90s at my parents' house in Lowell, Massachusetts. I will never forget this experience, as it was the most terrifying encounter I have ever had in my life. 2 deployments to Iraq and 8 years as a cop, but nothing comes close to the fear I had that day. I remember this happening in the late 90s, and I would say somewhere between 1997 to 1999. I would have been between 10 and 12 years old. We had 2 phone lines in our house. The main line, located by the living room, and the second in my brother's room. My 2 oldest brothers had already moved out of the house, and my brother wasn't home at the time. I asked my mum if I could go and hang out with my friend that lived 2 blocks away. She agreed. But I remember that she was using our main line. I went upstairs to use my brother's phone to call my friend. I walked into my brother's room and began to dial my buddy's number. I get about halfway through dialing and I froze. All the hairs on my body stood up and I was covered in goosebumps. It felt like my stomach sank. This feeling of being watched and that something came in the room behind me just hit me from nowhere. I knew it was there. I felt its presence. It was like it wanted me to know it was there. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear and carefully turned around. It was standing in the doorway of my brother's room, blocking my escape. It was huge. It was as tall as the doorframe and about as wide. I couldn't see eyes, but I knew it was staring at me. It looked crystal clear as water, with the edge of a human form. Its cloaking or invisibility appeared to fluctuate. Like the way the light passed through it seemed to refract in different directions, almost like water could take human form, but it obviously wasn't water. The only other way I could describe it was like the predator. The short period of time that I locked eyes on this creature or being, I began to pray profusely and uncontrollably. It felt like I had no control and the words shot from my mouth. In seconds, that probably felt like minutes, it stepped into the room and towards the windows across from the door. I never bothered to see where it went or if it disappeared. The moment I saw the opportunity to escape, I bolted from that room and down the stairs. I probably ran the fastest I ever have in my life. I'm not even sure how I didn't get hurt. My mum, who was just getting off the phone, asks me if I'm okay. She could tell something had scared the hell out of me. I'm now 35, and thankfully, I haven't experienced or seen anything else like that since. And I'd like to keep it that way. I'm glad that I'm not the only one who has seen them, as it made me question my sanity. I consider myself to be skeptical and still try to figure out logical explanations for what happened, but I can't. So what the hell are these things? Undiscovered life forms that have been here all along? Evil beings and spirits? Are they demons or aliens? It seems to me that in most encounters I've read, they like to instill fear and terror.
This story happened when I was 12 years old. I'm a female and I'm 25 now. The story I'm about to tell you might not be scary to most, but for me and my parents, it was. I remember it was a Saturday night around 9 or 10 p.m. during the summer. I owned one dog at the time and his name was Benny. My parents decided that night that they felt like going for a walk around the block with Benny and asked me if I wanted to join them. I said no because I wanted to play PWI on my computer. PWI stands for Perfect World International. My parents were okay with leaving me alone since the walk wouldn't take longer than 30 minutes. As my parents got dressed to leave the house, I logged into PWI and looked around at my guild and global chat to see if anybody was on. For some reason, nobody was, so I decided to join my parents. I got dressed, I put Benny on his leash, and we all left. I like to mention that I lived in an apartment building that had 10 floors and we lived on the very first floor. Anyway, we left the house and my dad closed the door. We had 3 keyholes and a steel bar that would block the door from the inside. The bar covered half of the door. Precautions were my father's obsession. We exited the building and enjoyed our walk, and after 15 minutes we realized the wind had changed from warm summer wind to incoming storm wind. My mother made the call to go back home as Benny already did all of his duties, so we all returned. We opened the building door, climbed the 5 stairs to our door, and attempted to open it. Then my father did the following. He unlocked the first 3 locks and then attempted to unlock the metal bar that holds the door locked. At that moment, my father paused, turned around at us with the most serious face I've ever seen on him, and whispered to us to call the police and ring the neighbor's door. My mom went to the second apartment, and the neighbor, who I'll call Ted, he came out asking my father what happened. My dad whispered to him as he was covering the see-through hole of the door and said, "Someone is in our house. He or they are holding the door. Please stay here with my family and attempt to open it. I will be back." After he said that, I saw my father rush all by himself around the building in the dark. And I say dark because we didn't have a street light on the side of our building. So my dad disappeared into the darkness, and I went outside too, just not following him too much, but only to hear if he was in trouble. As soon as I go out, I heard him shout, "Hey, you, come back! Who the hell do you think you are? I called the police." At the same time I heard him shout, I looked at Ted, who managed to open the door and enter the house. I went after them and entered my house, although it no longer felt like my house. In just 15 minutes while we were walking, the home invaders made a complete mess of it. All our shelves and wardrobes were pulled out, our clothes scattered all over the house, and Benny's dry food was all over the floor, indicating they must have tripped in his bowls, probably not knowing we even owned a dog. But what scared me the most was how organized they were. And I say they because after seeing the disaster that was left behind, we knew it was impossible for just one person to hold the door, steal, and organize what they want to take with them. On the couch, they placed our laptops, one of our TVs, my father's collection of coins, our phones, chargers, wallets, and even my father's camera. He's a photographer, and that week he had to attend a wedding. So they didn't have enough time to steal all of that, so they just settled with some of my mom's jewelry and some pocket money. After seeing this, in my silly child mind, I rushed to my room to check my piggy bank. I always saved up money from whatever chores I had to do, and it wasn't much, but it was my work and savings, and at that time, I thought they stole it too. When I entered my room, I saw the metal bars covering my windows were cut open and my window broken. This is how they entered, through my room. My room is the only room facing the side of the building and the most secluded from views. Needless to say, I never felt safe in my own room, in which I had to live for the next 10 years of my life until I moved in with my fiance. The police arrived and they started throwing white dust all over our house to find fingerprints. They took pictures, took our statements, and analyzed my room and window. They were unable to catch the home invaders, but were able to tell us that this invasion was not the only one in our neighborhood. During that month, another 4 houses were broken into, and one of them being the home of a different cop. They told us that the invaders analyzed their victims, learned their schedule, and even knew where the children's rooms were, as they seemed to be entering the houses through the kids' windows. And all the families that were affected all had children. They did not expect us to be back that soon and panicked, which is why one of them holding the door with his body so that the others could flee. The person after which my dad was shouting was probably the one holding the door and escaping through the broken window. So, I don't know what could have happened if I didn't change my mind and give up on raiding for gears in PWI. I would probably have come face to face with these invaders. I'm happy I didn't, and I hope to God I never ever meet with them again.